Once upon a time there was two friends, Drew Matthews and Scott James, who went to see the new Star Wars film at the Odeon. What they didn't know was that there were 7 masked men following them to the Odeon. Drew Matthews and Scott James tried not to look behind. However, when Scott James looked behind, one of the masked men grabbed him and went into his coat pocket. But Scott James defended them off and collected his and Drew Matthews' ticket. However, there was no member of staff checking tickets, and there was no member of staff checking tickets or by the screen, so where the screen is, where the new Star Wars film was showing. This was disgraceful and garbage by the staff who worked at the Odeon. But in a matter of seconds, these 7 masked men swung their arm and they caught Scott James. They took £20 from Drew Matthews in Scott James's wallets. Also their bank cards. So there was a huge police presence outside the Odeon. The police came in their huge numbers. However, in a twist, the 7 masked men named Faisal J. Mahmood, Paul James, Kevin Elliott, Richie McKenzie, Judd Anderson, Marco Richards and Benjamin Wilkinson, all from the Wicket area, aged between 21 and 26, in quite crazy circumstances. These 7 masked men were on the run, but the police handcuffed the 7 masked men, and they would learn in court from Judge Eamon Holmes how many years they would spend in prison. The next day the 7 masked men arrived at Leeds Crown Court. Also arriving at the Leeds Crown Court was the girlfriends of the 2 friends, their family, and the defence team sat down in court. The first person to speak was Scott James. Judge Eamon Roberts asked Scott James for a flashback and how these 7 masked men found them. Scott James told Eamon Roberts that him and Drew Matthews were on the way to the cinema, and these 7 masked men were loitering. They were following them around Castle Square. Castle Square tram stop, all the way to the Odeon. Right, Judge Eamon Roberts then asked Scott James what else was in the wallet of his and Drew Matthews. Scott James said their student cards and their bank cards and also £20. So next to speak was Richie McKenzie. Judge Eamon Roberts asked why did he and his mates follow Scott James and Drew Matthews. Richie McKenzie said he and his mates never followed Scott James and Drew Matthews to the Odeon. He said they weren't in Sheffield and that the police said the wrong people. Judge Eamon Roberts was not impressed with what Richie McKenzie said in court. He and the 7 masked men denied all the charges against them. Next to speak in court was Drew Matthews. He said that he's utter rubbish, which means trash. It was trash talking. What Richie McKenzie said, he showed Judge Eamon Roberts the messages what these men had texted them on the day before they headed to the Odeon. The next person that Judge Eamon Roberts wanted to hear from was Scott James, who is Drew Matthews' friend and housemate from the University of Sheffield. Scott James gave his version of how events had unfolded. Scott James said that about 9 PM on Monday that him and Drew Matthews both received a phone call from the 7 masked men. Said to us, why did you ignore our phone call? So they phoned again.
11 o'clock next Friday.
They said, what's your problem, you silly people? You are so weak. I'm not going to use that word. Like you silly men. You are so weak. We are going to come to your student accommodation and we are going to take everything from your bedroom and everything what is in your house, and we are going to find your girlfriend. Scott James had brought the tape with him when he and Drew Matthews arrived to Leeds Crown Court. The Judge Eamon Roberts watched the tape back along with the girlfriends of Drew Matthews and Scott James. Their families for the first time watched the tape, which shows the 7 masked men had a dangerous weapon on them. You can hear Scott James and Drew Matthews' voices which say, leave us both alone, what do you want? You are wasting your times. Find something better to do and stop bothering us. Stop buggering us. We are trying to do our university work. I don't know what you want. Please just leave us alone. How did you get our numbers? Their families were horrified. But by what they watched on the tape, it now showed on the tape the 2 friends walking down Fargate past the cathedral, which shows the 7 masked men waiting in the distance. by Sports Direct. They then see the two friends. They walk past Sports Direct, which now shows the seven masked men. They take the same route as Scott James and Drew Matthews. They walk past the O2 Academy and into the Odeon. The men were behind them. They went into the Odeon. The seven masked men then looked over the shoulder, watching what Drew Matthews put in his card into the machine to select the showing for him and Scott James. Once they bought the tickets, the seven masked men, they grab onto Scott James. Before the show, Scott James looking behind, making sure they weren't watching them. However, these seven masked men were watching every movement that Drew Matthews and Scott James, and then it showed the seven masked. And then it shows the seven men. They grabbing Scott James. Scott James defended them off, but Scott James was seriously hurt. He was covered in blood. The girlfriends of Drew Matthews and Scott James were absolutely disgusted by what they were watching. Judge Eamon Roberts now knew who was telling the truth. Late that morning, Eamon Roberts adjourned the court. He decided he needed to think it over before he made a decision on how long the seven men would face in prison. The seven men were facing 7 years in prison for their behaviours towards towards the two friends, and also the threats that they made towards the two friends, and also for what they took from Scott James as well. The next day, Judge Eamon Roberts, he asked the seven men to stand up. He handed the seven men 7 years in prison for robbery and for all the threats that these seven men made to the two friends. However, there would be a twist. There'd be a twist to this saga. The seven men decided to appeal the decision Eamon Roberts made, handing them 7 years in prison. The next day, the seven men, they appealed the decision that Eamon Roberts made, but the seven men, they learned their appeals were turned down, and that the 7 year sentence that it stood. The seven men were drove off by the police, and they were taken to a prison in Doncaster where they would face up to 7 years in prison and also a community service. The next day, the seven men were put into their cells in Doncaster. They were determined to clear their names, but yet they denied all the charges. These men were not finished. They appealed the decision. Again, which was heard by a panel who again turned down their appeals. These seven men were wasting their time. That's what Drew Matthews said to Scott James, who both agreed these men were wasting their time trying to get the decision overturned. However, in a flash, Scott James he received 10 stitches to his face. The seven men had landed. His face was covered in blood. The seven men had landed. His face was covered in blood. Scott James had to go to the Royal Hospital, to the Royal Infirmary Hospital. Scott James would spend a week in hospital. The next day, Scott James had come out of hospital. He was feeling much better, but in really extreme circumstances. The two friends, they went to university. When they turned up, what they didn't know. What they didn't know was there was two dangerous men who were on the run. They were named Duncan Phillips and Martin Thomas. The police caught two dangerous men, Duncan Phillips and Martin Thomas, but what happened was quite a disgrace, in my opinion. Right, there was a student who had learning difficulties. They were making some really personal remarks. The young men who had learning difficulties, his name's called Duncan Phillips and Martin Thomas. They said to him, "I hope you don't get a job. You're not allowed to work because you have a disability." This young man, Nicholas Martins, he rang his carer. He told his carer that these people had been bothering him. They made some insulting remarks, telling me they hoped I didn't get a job because of my disability. The next day, Nicholas Martins he appeared on Look North with his carer Tim Williams, who is a student at Sheffield Hallam University. The next day, Scott James and Drew Matthews decided to go to walkabout and watch the football on TV. But what was going to happen next was horrifying and quite ridiculous. Scott James asked for a pint of Guinness. The girl who was serving behind the bar, she said, I'm not serving you. I refuse to serve you and your friend Drew Matthews because you study at the University of Sheffield. There was a massive confrontation. Scott James asked to speak to the bar manager at Walkabout. The guy who was the venue manager at Walkabout went to the bar manager and said there was someone wanted to speak to him. So the bar manager arrived, and Scott James and Drew Matthews, who was named Kevin Scott. Scott James said to Kevin Scott he asked for a pint of Guinness he asked for a pint of Guinness for him and Drew Matthews when the girl behind the bar said to me she wouldn't refuse me. The bar said to me she would, when the girl behind the bar said to me she would refuse to serve me because I'm a student at University of Sheffield. So the bar manager called the girl into his office. He told the girl that he was absolutely disgusted with the attitude, also said that she had crossed the line. Kevin Scott, he said to his worker Nicola Wilkinson, Nicola Wilkinson, I'm disgusted with your attitude. How dare you refuse to serve people? So how dare you refuse to serve someone because they study at University of Sheffield? You are really testing my patience. You have overstepped the mark. Go home and do not come back. Her response to the bar manager was, stuff you. Right, I'm not going home now. The manager was getting more annoyed. He decided to call security. He said to her, if you do not go, I will call the security and they will escort you out of my venue. I am in charge. You should have done your job, which was to serve customers and to be polite to the customers who come to the venue. However, the girl, she no longer worked for Walkabout. The end, Sam Jenkinson. Done.